Hey, welcome to the podcast review show. I'm your host, Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com. This is where we bring somebody on and we help them shine those things that they're doing good so they can do more of those. And maybe those things that need tweaked just a little bit, we kind of point those out so they can do less of those. Joining me, you might know him from podcasttalentcoach.com, Erik K. Johnson. Erik, how's it going, buddy?
Hey, Dave. Glad to be back at it again.
And tonight from STEMstory.com, we have Prash. Prash, how are you?
Good. How are you, Dave? Thank you for having me.
Oh, this ought to be fun. What inspired you to start STEMstory.com?
Yeah, so STEM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics. It's an acronym that was founded by someone in the U.S. government to promote kids to study these disciplines together because they make sense for a future workforce. And so that's the word STEM, but I am an engineer by education and by trade. So I work in a manufacturing facility and I'm a quality manager. And when I first started, at one point, my team had like 5 women engineers, and they were all mechanical and electrical engineers from around the world. And to me, that was just crazy because I kept hearing on social media that there was a dearth of women in engineering. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, like all my friends are engineers and all my, colleagues are engineers and they're women, and what's going on? So I just decided to share their stories through the medium of podcasting because I thought it was so accessible. So I started in December 2017.
Nice. So you're coming up on 2 years.
Yes.
What's I have a segment of one of my shows where I call them Because of My Podcast Stories. So has anything happened to you that wouldn't have happened, but it did because you had a podcast? You have any?
Oh my God, way too many things. I mean, it's crazy. I have gotten tons and tons of opportunities to do public speaking. And that's something I didn't know, like how much I enjoy it. Like I am alive when I do that. So I feel like if someone's going to pay me to speak, like I feel like that would be like the dream job. So I'm definitely sure that so many wonderful things have happened. Like last week I spoke at a panel at MIT, which was my dream college. Obviously couldn't get in, but I got a chance to speak there. So wonderful opportunities, get to meet a lot of wonderful people around the world.
Dave, Prash, and I had a chance to work together about a year and a half ago, right after she launched her podcast. And Prash, at that time, you told me one of your dreams was to do a TED Talk. Has that ever come about?
Not yet, but I finally have the people who can help me. And I am very, very confident that I will probably get invited to one. So let's see what happens, but I'm going to start applying very soon now that I have a lot of support and, people who are inspiring me to do that. But it'll happen.
Tell me a little bit about the virtual conference that you've launched with other women in STEM.
Yeah, so we started last year, and then as you know, podcasting is a very you don't get to meet people in person, and it's very story based. In my case, it's just about the other guest and myself maybe. And so this was a great way to include the audience into the conversation. And we realized that there was a lack of resources and tools, and women were we were throwing a lot of inspiration at people, but we were not giving them the tools to then go and, apply these lessons in their own life. So that's kind of where the conference came about last year. And this year we're doing it for the second time. Of course, we're doing it bigger and better than last year, and so we're supported by a lot of sponsors, and we're almost able to achieve our fundraising goals. So it's been wonderful, but it's just our effort to give back to our audience in terms of tools, resources. And my biggest thing with conferences is they're so expensive. I never have the money. I never have the time. It's just inaccessible. And I just want to make it accessible for everyone around the world. So that's kind of what the concept is.
That's great.
What's probably the biggest lesson if somebody's thinking of doing their own online conference? What would you, now that you've done one, what do you think is the biggest thing you learned from your first experience with this?
I feel like don't do it for free. Like that's number one. Like we did it for free last year. We got a lot of signups, but very few people showed up. And then there was not that kind of commitment. So we're still charging less, but you should charge like whatever it is that makes sense to you. You can justify. That's definitely lesson number one. I think number two is like just do it. Just don't think about it. Just go for it. Just do it. Just get the domain. Once you do the first step, everything else will fall in place. I'm extremely lucky that there are a lot of people who want to support and help. But at the end of the day, it's just a couple of us who are doing the whole thing. But, again, just find those people who will support you. Don't ask for permission, because a lot of people start asking like, oh, should I do this? And then people are like, no, sure, you shouldn't do it. And then people don't do anything. So I feel like I don't ask. I just tell people, I'm like, I'm doing it. Do you want to be on board or not? And we go from there.
Nice. Erik, any other questions before we start hitting play on these on the clips here?
No, I'm looking forward to diving into this one.
All right. I love the energy. We're going to hit I think this is about 2 minutes of the beginning of the show here, just to kind of give you an idea. Yeah, there's nothing awkward about listening to yourself and other people.
Now, actually, I love it. I love it now. I love my voice, so I can do this. But being judged is different.
when I was a musician, that was always, especially if it was like my own music, I would hit play and run out of the room because I was too embarrassed to listen to it, which doesn't say much for your music if you're embarrassed to hear it. But here is the podcast.
Hi everyone, this is your host Prash, and welcome to Her STEM Stories episode number 62. I want to give a quick shout out to Lindsay Fitzsimmons for being our patron on Patreon, and I want to say thank you so much, Lindsay, for helping us grow and promote this show. Lindsay is also joining our team at Her STEM Story, and we'll have more information about the same. You can also support us at patreon.com/Her STEM Story. You can use the link in the episode notes and donate as little as $2 and support our show. Go check out geniuslabgear.com and buy our merchandise, which is super cute. I just got my tote bag and I took it to the beach and I got so many compliments. So you definitely need to go check that out. It is very economical and we get a good margin so that we can support and promote this show. So please go to geniuslabgear.com and check out our collection. Today is a very special episode because Christine Liu, the founder of the STEM Squad and the 2 Photon Art, is making a podcasting debut on Her STEM Story. And this was one of my most wonderful conversations, and I can't wait to share it with you. So keep listening.
Welcome to Her STEM Story, a podcast about real women with extraordinary science, technology, engineering, and mathematics stories. In this show, we'll talk to some absolutely inspiring women and highlight some women-led organizations in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. We'll learn more about their work, their struggles, and how they think we can close the gender gap in STEM professions. Keep listening to get inspired.
Today we're talking to a community trailblazer and a SciComm celebrity. I have waited so long to record this episode because Christine Liu is one of my favorite people online and in SciComm. She's currently a 5th-year PhD candidate at UC Berkeley in neuroscience. She graduated in biology and psychology, double major from the University of Oregon in 2014. She is the founder of 2 Photon Art and also the founder of the STEM Squad. If you don't know this community, do go check it out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. They are amazing and they support our work and a lot of other SciComm work from minorities in STEM fields. So today we're talking to Christine and let's get to know her amazing STEM story. Hi, Christine. How are you?
Hey, Prashta. I'm doing really well. I'm so glad that I am making one of my first podcast debuts on Her STEM Story. I just, absolutely love what you're doing. And thank you for saying so much nice stuff about me. You're making me blush.
So, Erik, I'll let you go first on what you thought of the intro. And
I love the intro energy. I love the energy as we're rolling into it. The recorded portion of the intro, I thought, told us exactly what the show was all about and what we get by listening to the show. I thought it was a little interesting that all of the housekeeping stuff happened prior to the recorded intro. I felt like we were already rolling into the show and then the recorded intro kind of jumped out at me. We talked about thanking Lindsay for being a Patreon member. We talked about going over to Genius Lab to get the merch stuff. We talked a little bit about Christine and how you were excited about doing this interview, and then the kind of show open hit, rather than what the way most people would roll into an episode is give me a little tease of what the episode's about, hit me with the introduction. So if I'm brand new to the show, I know what the podcast is all about, and then after that, let's do a little housekeeping and then roll into the introduction of Christine. I thought the introduction of Christine, once we got there, was solid. You gave us a lot about her background, why she is an expert in her field, what her background's all about, and why we should care about what she has to say. So overall, I thought the intro was solid. I would have just put the housekeeping after the podcast introduction.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. Why just the one patron? Was she like a new patron, or?
Yeah, I only have 2 patrons. So
okay,
she was the first. She was the second one.
Okay, so is the idea they're always going to get a shout out at the beginning, or was it she had just joined and you were making a big deal about it?
Yeah, just because she has joined, and then now that you guys are mentioning that, I don't know where that whole like saying thank yous before comes from. Like, I don't know, but yeah. But
well, the reason I bring that up is if you go, hey, if you join Patreon, I'll give you a shout out at the beginning of the show. If that actually takes off, then it's gonna, like, your intro is gonna go on forever. So you have to kind of be careful about. But and I'm with Erik. I would have moved that. I would have got to, like, you did a great job of introducing, like, that's the one thing. You have some amazing guests. I was looking through the other one. The one woman has like 4 kids and a PhD, and I was like, holy cow.
Yeah, it's really cool.
So a really great resume. The one thing I thought was interesting is you're like, I'm so excited that she's here, but the whole time I was like, kind of looking for like the why. Like you never really said, like, I just got the feeling like she is a big shot smarty pants.
Yes, she is.
And I'm really glad she's here, but I was kind of like, well, why? And it was just, and now on the other hand, it was very transparent and very, what's the word? It wasn't put on at all that you were excited. And that's the part that I was like, I can tell the reason why you're not giving me a why is because you're just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe she's on the show. So that's the part I thought that was cool. And then you did my favorite thing. And Erik, I'm sure you probably were giggling when you heard that. You did my favorite thing, which is music for the sake of nothing. It wasn't that long. I'm really being nitpicky here, but I would have had the music fade out as I started to introduce, instead of like, hey, here's 10 seconds of, we just kind of sit there and wait. And then, then it finally goes away. Like, okay, hey, welcome to the show. I would rather say, hey, welcome to the show. I'm so happy that you're here, and just fade it out as you go along so that nothing really ever stops. It just flows from one to the other. It's like I said, I'm a kind of a nitpicky person for that. And then I thought it was funny because you guys had kind of a dueling banjos about, I think you're great. And then she's like, no, I think you're great. No, you're great. So I thought that was kind of cute. I did notice by the time you did the intro, then the introduction, like you actually said it 3 minutes in, okay, let's get started. And I was like, that's not a super long time. Yeah. But it was kind of like, all right, enough with the, no, you're great. And I was like, that was at 3 minutes. But there was some really good conversations. It was funny. I forgot to read the description of the show. So I had no clue what I was listening to when I listened to it. And when I first saw the word STEM, I'm like, is this like a stem cell research kind of thing or whatever? And then when I got into it, anytime as a middle-aged white dude, anytime I can get an opinion of how middle-aged white dudes in many cases are really sticking their foot in their mouth, I'm like, wow, this is the stuff I really need to listen to. So I was listening to it today in Chipotle, and just everything that was coming up, I'm like, wow, didn't know that. Oh, wow. Yeah. And just different cultures and things that people are doing. I had no idea what to expect, but I'm like, wow, this is, to me, I thought it was a great conversation. Just to give you a little clip here.
I think making sure to treat everyone as if they truly belong there. I mean, even as a U.S. citizen, I still sometimes get comments from lab mates that imply that I am maybe less American than they are. And I know that their intention is not like that, but I think sometimes something as benign as a comment can actually make people feel quite excluded.
And let me play you one other clip, because this is the one she mentioned,
aggressions.
macroaggression. I've never heard that phrase. So I was really glad that she gave an example.
For example, something that probably has happened to you, it happens to me a lot, is people asking me where I'm from. And then I say San Francisco. And then they ask me, no, where are you really from?
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, well, I spent a few years in Oregon. And they're like, no, I mean, where are your parents from? And until I tell them, basically my ethnic makeup, they're not satisfied with the answer. And this.
Yeah. So that is one thing I've noticed. And I think, Erik, I see in his notes here, you have no problem getting your guest to talk. It was hard for me to get clips where I'm almost all of these, I'm cutting her mid-sentence because she's off to the races again. And I was like,
she talks a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just like that, because it was just something I'd never thought of. I heard it was a different podcast, and I didn't realize that how frequently the first thing you say to somebody who is blind is, so how did you lose your sight? And it's somewhat annoying that, like, within the first 3 minutes of meeting a blind person, somebody's like going to go, so like, and they're kind of like, ugh. And they all have like, okay, here's the story. And so to me, this was just another example of something that I was like, I could see where that'd be like, oh, we're gonna play guess my ethnicity without, you're trying to get me to say China or Vietnam or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So Erik, what are your thoughts on kind of the conversation as it was going along?
I thought the conversation was great. You felt really comfortable in it, and it didn't feel like a question and answer session. When you first started off, you asked her, so many people start their podcast or their interview and they say, tell me a little bit about yourself. And you didn't start there, Prasha. You started with, tell us about your research, which was a lot more specific than tell us about yourself. And she really dove into her research. And I thought, man, that's a great question to start with, because now she's going to tell us exactly what she's studying. Unfortunately, she's studying everything in the world. And so when she started going, she went on for a long time. And she's a great conversationalist, because she isn't for the lack of words. When a guest does that, you need to find ways to either politely interrupt them to focus them on one part of their answer, to dive a little deeper into that, or focus the question a little bit more. So when she starts diving into her research and how she started there at the University of Illinois, and she was diving into all of these circadian rhythms and things that she was studying, I would have politely jumped in and just kind of interrupted her and said, Prasha, hold on one second. Let me stop you right there. What do you mean by that? Or what does that mean? Or how does that affect the body? Or how did you get into that part? Or what sort of classes do you take to learn about circadian rhythms? Or figure out a way to kind of break her up a little bit. Because when her answers go on for 3 or 4 minutes, it's easy to kind of get lost in that monologue and tune out a little bit. The way the two voices play back and forth with each other are what keeps our minds engaged in that conversation. So I would just try and find ways to jump in with her a little bit more. I loved her answers, and I loved how you would converse with her when she did finish her answer, and you would jump in. It wasn't just on to the next question. Yeah. You did a great job paraphrasing what she just said in 3 minutes. You said, so basically what you're saying is ABC. And it was really succinct. And then you would go on to the next question. And I love that. It kind of put a little bow on her long answer, and then kind of took you into another area or a follow-up question. So I love the conversation about it. She just covers a lot of territory in her answers. Find ways to break that up a little bit more.
Okay.
Yeah, there were a bunch of them. I have a bunch of little clips. The one that really, I was sitting there, I was like, hey, you know what? I've seen this happen so many times, and I've never thought, hey, why are we doing to that person? And here it is. My button's not working.
Sexual harassment is an example of that, where we wait for people who have been sexually harassed or assaulted to raise the issue. And then we expect them to be the ones to lead the charge on tackling these issues. And then so we end up having people who have been hurt by the system, or individuals who also have the responsibility to lead the change, which I don't think is the best way to help.
And I just heard that and I was like, you know what? That's true. It's always like, hey, Mrs. Victim, now that you're dealing with all this stuff and the media and everything else that's attracting it, how about picking up the torch and running with it? I'm like, I think they're probably a little tired. And I was like, it's just one of those things. I was like, wow, I've seen that happen so many times and I've never noticed it. So like I said, to me, I loved it just because I felt like a fly on the wall, getting different perspectives that are not mine, just because of where I live and what I am. And I was like, never thought of it that way. So anytime you can get me to think, is something that I was like, wow, this is, I think my favorite clip of the whole conversation was this one.
Yeah, I think these things are all tied together about like the lack of strategy and having a safety net. So for a lot of immigrants and children of immigrants, not only do we not have a safety net, we are our parents' safety net.
Yeah.
So there's really no option of failing. So the strategy often comes from a necessity, just to avoid, imploding everything that the family has sacrificed.
So I've always, you always, the stereotype, right, is the Asian kid that's super smart and the Indian kid. And I'm like, now I get it, because the parents sacrificed everything to get their kid here. And I was like, oh, it's like, I probably knew that, but she just put it out there so well that I was like, it was just a completely different viewpoint, or just something that I learned. And I don't know, that was one that I was like, wow, I never thought of that. So
there's a thing called I'm my parents 401k for immigrant students, because really, like, they, a lot of families don't have, anything in some of the third world countries, and not saying that India and China have a better economy now, but but then a lot of kids are really trying to bring their parents here after retirement. A lot of these families live together, so there's like a hashtag, I think, that goes like, I'm my parents 401k.
Well, she had a lot of great points like that. But they get swallowed up in her long answer. So when she gives an answer, or she makes a comment like that, that's a great opportunity for you to jump in and clarify what she's saying, or ask her a follow-up question about that part. Like, tell me about a time when you ran into that in your own personal life, or tell me about a time when you had to fight that in the workplace, or describe to me how you overcome that, or when people encounter that, what should they do? What's their next step? And have her clarify it a little bit more. And that kind of focuses her answer and kind of gives her a path to follow. When you're doing an interview on your show, you know your audience and what your audience wants to learn and understand and know about your guest. Your guest is just kind of giving all of the information they know, because they have no idea where the target is. So when you ask those great follow-up questions and you help focus the answer, it really helps your guest provide the content that your audience seeks. It helps your guest know where the target is.
Makes a lot of sense. Yes.
And as the conversation went on, I really kind of started to see why you're doing your podcast. I could kind of start to see the community and just the conversation. And I heard this and I'm like, that's why you're doing this podcast.
But it's really hard to do that, to get started, when there is not a lot of support. And I think the voices that we need to hear the most are often the ones that are being actively silenced the most. So it's really important, I think, that we actively support things that we want to see.
And so I thought the phrase actively silenced, that just jumped out at me. And I was like, man, that's not a good phrase right there. And it really, I just went to Atlanta. I went to a women's podcasting conference, and I asked somebody, I said, so what was different? I said, I was at a booth the whole time. And they said, well, number one, diversity. And they said, and people who have had great messages for years, but can't get on a stage, finally got to get on a stage. And so again, probably not on purpose, but actively silenced. It's just, there's only so many spots, and they finally got to shine. And so when I heard that, I was like, that's why this podcast is here, because you're giving these people a chance to share their story, inspire others, give them strategies. I love the story she was talking about how she's got a master's degree and only has $8,000 in debt. And I'm like, wait, how does that happen? And so she explained how every time she had a break, she was looking, and most of her jobs were strategic to get her lined up to, that somehow applied to her job in the future. And I just thought that was a great tip for somebody who might be in her shoes. Like, here's a way to do this without, having to sell your soul.
Because there's a Tony Robbins says it's not about how many resources you have, it's about how resourceful you are. So I feel like, a lot of people who graduate with no college debt, obviously some of them have help from parents, but it's also about being, resourceful through the toughest years of your, college life, I guess.
Yeah. The only thing that jumped out at me that I was like, huh? And I think it's just simply an easy case of the curse of knowledge. And you kind of jumped this in here.
Sponsoring someone's website. And I mean, we did this with Kathryn, and, Kathryn was our first SAI fellow. We did the same thing. We had, $200 budget or something, and we were training these fellows. We trained her in podcasting, and she's going to launch her own podcast.
And you never explained who that Kathryn is. And that's because I'm pretty sure your guest knew who she is, and you did. But I'm and you're just like, Kathryn's thing, and she's launching a podcast. Yeah, I'm like, who? What?
Good old Kathryn. We love it.
Yeah. Well, and at the end, you mentioned, I think she's next week's guest, which was actually something you did very good.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, maybe she's going to go back and go, hey, the Kathryn I was talking about. Yes, she's coming. And I was like, nope. But I'm like, I bet that's her, though, because everybody knows Kathryn.
This is the problem. This is the problem with women, like one woman interviewing another woman. It can get sidetracked very fast.
I do that on occasion. I will, especially if we had a conversation before we hit record, I will say something and everybody else knows it, but I forget that the listener wasn't around for that part of the conversation. And they're like, what are they talking about? I have no idea. So
yeah, that's the danger of the conversation before the conversation. You can't remember if you actually did it on the show or did we do it when the mics were off? I can't remember if we actually talked about this yet.
Yeah. Any other points, Erik, before we get into the ending?
No, I thought the conversation was very natural. The flow between the two of you really felt great. I loved it.
And it ended up like this.
And that was Christine with her incredible STEM story. Please use the links in the episode notes to follow Christine and her amazing work. Next week, we will chat with Kathryn Hatcher, who is a neuroscientist, an Instagrammer, science communicator, STEM advocacy fellow, and a soon-to-be podcaster. Kathryn was on the show before as a part of our team, but she is launching her show in August, and this episode is so wonderful. So make sure to tune in next week. If you like our show, please leave us a review on iTunes, and please tag us in your posts at Her STEM Story on all social media platforms. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.
And then we dance. My favorite pet peeve. So you could have just had this, and anyway, not that long of a music, but we lost her.
See, now you made her angry.
That's it. She's like, screw it. You're making fun of my music. All right.
You didn't get to see your great dance moves. That was unfortunate.
Edit point 1.
Because you have the best.
And
we're still dancing.
Yeah.
I see the circle.
And she's back. Except we can't hear you.
You're muted.
Yeah.
Your mic is muted.
Can I?
Okay, sorry.
There we go.
The internet froze. So it's like, oh my God, what happened?
What happened?
You had the deer in the headlights look. You were like looking at your computer like,
I was like,
what just happened? What happened?
I thought I scared you away with my awesome dance moves. So there was music at the end, and I was like...
I was connecting to my personal hotspot and trying everything, and it wasn't working. I was like, what the hell happened? And I didn't know you guys could see me. So,
yeah. All right. So let's take a peek at your website. The one thing that I have found, at least, wow, that's kind of fun.
Whoa, hey, slow down.
Yeah, let's try that again. It didn't do that the first time I did that.
I didn't hear your comments on the ending, but I can probably hear it on the episode.
I thought it was good. The only thing that you know what, we didn't comment on the ending, did we?
We did not.
No, because it went into that. So yeah, so
Okay,
the ending.
that's all right.
The only thing I had on the ending was one I had, you mentioned the show notes. I don't think you ever mentioned your website. Erik, did you hear her mention the website? Did I miss that?
Nope. Need the web address.
Okay. Yeah, no, I don't think I do. Yeah.
And you, at the very end, the reason I was dancing is you had another 15 to 20 seconds of music that I was, but you did a great job of fading it in, and I just would have faded it out a little quicker, but you know, I'm just Captain Impatient, I guess, when it comes to music.
Expecting something more, and then it doesn't happen. And
yeah.
Think, oh, what happened?
Yeah. Anything else on the ending?
I thought the ending was clean. I love the way you promote next week's guest to get people to come back next week. That was great. You didn't have too many calls to action. We hear so many that include 10 or 12. You had 2. Use the links in the show notes and tag us on social media. So it was quick and clean. Again, put the web address in there. I thought that was great. And yeah, I thought the ending was tight. It was, you had a single focus to get people to head over to the notes. So, you know, when you and I first started working together, we were working on your sound quality. I thought the sound quality of your show was spot on. It was a lot stronger than where it was recording in the kitchen a year and a half ago. So you come a long way there, and it sounds great.
Yeah, I was very happy to see that because I see where you have a Blue Yeti, but you're actually using it properly. You're not talking into the top of it. You have a pop filter.
Because of that guy.
Yeah.
That's because of that guy.
Yeah. Well,
Erik.
Yeah. So I've always said the Blue Yeti is not a horrible microphone. You just have to know how to use it and kind of get up on it. And when I saw the pictures of you, I'm like, oh, there's a Yeti. I'm like, and she's not talking into the top of it. This is not going to sound like it was, recorded in a... Go ahead.
Yeah, and I was like, every time, like, I see pictures of people because a lot of female podcasters that especially do a lot of photo shoots with Yeti, because Yeti is such a good looking mic. And I mean, I'm like, you're spending so much money on these professional pictures, fix the mic, like you're talking into the top of the mic. So I get really like anal about it too now. So I'm glad.
So tell me about your website. Is this WordPress? Is it Squarespace? Do you know what?
So it's WordPress. Yes, it's WordPress.org that we hosted through. It's a special theme. It was built only for musicians and podcasters. And so that's why the theme is like sort of optimized for podcasts. Got it.
Because all in all, I like the website. Everything kind of pops up, and you got a lot of nice white space and some great pictures. And this is where when I was looking at just the descriptions of, if I go here to show more shows, where it was showing like, here's, forget the one woman who has, here's one, a neuroscientist, a community. That's actually the person we were listening to. Just the titles of your guests, I was like, holy cow, computer scientist, a model, and an advocate. I'm like, that sounds like the beginning of a joke. A computer scientist, a model, and an advocate walk into a bar. But it's
just one person, all 3 things.
So, I was just like, wow, you have some really interesting people. The only thing, and I'm trying to get it to do it now, if I switch to another page, I don't know did you see that weird little error message at the top that comes up? If you watch,
I saw that.
If you watch up here, at the very top here, underneath the address bar, I don't know what's going on there. But it's not, and I don't know that people are going to notice that.
Yeah.
It flashes quite briefly, and then the page populates.
Yeah. So I don't know if
I'll
you
get
have.
It checked. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll get it checked.
It's just one of those things where it was like, because the first time I went to it, it was on the screen a little longer. It wasn't a huge thing, but I was like, I went click and I went, oh, it's going to be hard to review this. And then it came back up and I was like, oh, well, and it's been super quick ever since then. So just one of those things you might want to check. But Erik, what are your thoughts on the website?
I saw that, Erik.
I love the clean look of it. I love the photos for each of the episodes. They're very consistent, though they're different. They have it's your guest. It's a kind of an upper torso shot of your guest with a lower third that has the podcast episode information on it. It's consistent, but it reveals their personality in the photo as well. And I love that sort of creative consistency through all of your episode graphics. I love the clean look of it. My favorite thing, and Prash, I think I may have mentioned this to you in the past, is the illustration up top is kind of cartoonish, faceless in general, yet shows the diversity of your show, which I think is really cool because it doesn't pigeonhole any one single female. It kind of embraces everybody, but it shows the diversity as well as the anonymity. And I think that's really cool. That's a cool part of your show and how inclusive the show is. I love the clean look of the website. I love how it's super easy to navigate. And the one thing that kind of frustrated me a little bit is when I played the episode on your website, I couldn't find any controls. I couldn't back up. Like I would hear you say something, or I would hear her say something, and I'd want to back up 15 seconds or 30 seconds, and there was no control. There wasn't even a slider for me to go back and forth. When I hit play here on the episode, I get a different player than when I click on the episode and bring up the episode page and use the player there. But neither one of them I come up with a way to back it up. So I got out of your website and I went over to Apple Podcasts and I listened to it there. So if you're on this page here's the player, and you hit play here, it doesn't give you any controls.
Comes in down here.
Yeah.
And then down there, down at the bottom, it shows me the waveform, and I could click on the waveform, but I couldn't download the waveform to listen to it elsewhere there. So that was just I'm used to just some basic standard controls, the forward, backward sort of buttons. So other than that, I thought the website was great. Your newsletter could use a little.
Yeah, at the bottom on the home page, I see where it says, there's nothing there. And you go down, it just says subscribe. And I'm like, is there a link here? So that's an oversight on my part, but I also I don't know if it showed you the first time that you opened it. Did it give you a subscription pop-up? There's a pop-up actually if you probably.
So I just did a lead magnet that I started a few months ago, which is more like a 5 email series, like 5 email series. And then I have gotten a lot of response, like people are responding to it, which is like hitting reply and saying things. So that ends with hey, let's chat, because again, I'm still trying to, understand my audience and what can I do more. So I've had 3 or 4 calls, but the email list has definitely grown because of that. Just the little effort that I put into it, not a lot. But I know that the bottom link doesn't work. So I'm going to try to fix it.
The other thing I would swap out is you have a link to Google Play, and Google Play is dead app walking. We're all waiting for Google to take it out behind the barn and let it go. It's never been released worldwide. It was only released in North America. And you can get your link. Out. Okay. I would switch that to Google Podcast, which is it's weird. They have 2 podcasting apps, and they're probably going to do kind of what Apple is doing, where they've separated their podcast and their music. There will be Google Music and there will be Google Podcast. And so from the back end of Libsyn on a regular basis, I see Google Play. It'll go weeks fine, and then we'll have a week of nothing but people going, it's not updating, I can't find anything, and it breaks, and we're just kind of would they just please just take it out behind the barn and put it out of its misery? So I would swap that out. The conference thing, I just was curious as to why. This is great. When I saw this, is wow, this is really amazing. like this link here, it just looks from a reading standpoint, I would turn this into a button or something. Because when I first saw this, I thought it was actually like a mistake. Like, wow, there's code in the middle of her page.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's actually just a link. And it's not,
Yeah.
I mean, I see when I put my finger over
Underlined.
it wasn't super obvious that it was a link. But other than that, like I say, I'm kind of nitpicking, but I just thought I was
I know for sure. Yeah, I totally agree with all those comments because that conference link should look better for sure.
What do you use for how do you do an online conference? Is it just Facebook
Zoom,
Live,
actually.
Zoom? Oh, there we go.
Yeah, so we do it through Zoom, and then the last year's conference we actually couldn't edit it because I recorded it as a full. I mean, I didn't even hit like stop after every talk. I kept recording, so it was a 7.5 hour long video, and now you can't edit it because if you try to upload it on a Mac Air or smaller PCs, it crashes the whole system. So I said, enough. I'm just gonna put the whole thing on YouTube. So the whole thing is on YouTube.
There you go.
Like
Enjoy.
7.5 hours. Yeah, I call it like the uncut version. Like it's completely everything on Google, on YouTube.
Did you have any questions for us?
Oh yeah. Like I feel like I'm just said the audio was good because that's always been my worry that I don't have great mic. I don't do a lot of processing. Like my audio is not processed. I don't do a lot of like automatic, because I don't understand a lot of the noise reduction and this and that. And early on working with Erik, I realized that, the best way to get audio quality is to record good quality. And that's it. Like you can't just, try to keep manipulating it. So I don't manipulate it. So I was worried that you guys are going to probably pick up on the sound issues. So I'm really excited that wasn't the case. Of course, it can improve, right? I mean, just like anything, we can still do better.
No, I listen to mine while
what
watching.
mic would you say if I were to graduate from Yeti for my second birthday?
The one that Erik's using, the Audio Technica ATR 2100 or the Samson Q2U.
Say that again.
The Audio Technica ATR 2100, or I actually am kind of leaning, it kind of depends. The Samson Q2U, I think, sounds like this much, just barely a little better. It's a little more bottom end to it, a little warmer, and it's also cheaper. It's about $60. The Audio Technica ATR 2100 is about $80, but it's got a lifetime warranty where the Samson Q2U does not. But they're both very similar. I like them because you can use them with a mixer. So if you ever upgraded and you had people in the same room with you, you could go into some sort of mixer or an interface, but it also just works plugging it into your computer like your Yeti does. So it's a pretty handy microphone. And it just, the microphone I'm talking into is about $300. This one's about $80, and there's not $220 difference between the two. And so it's kind of like you said earlier, it's when you use a decent microphone, you don't really have to, adjust it much. You can always tweak it and add different EQ and compression and noise reduction. But in the end, if you've recorded something decent, most people, when they listen to a podcast, are doing something else. Very rarely, I think, are people like sitting down in the den and by themselves and strapping on some hits. It's usually I'm walking the dog, or I'm in the grocery store, I'm in the car, or whatever. So those little nuances that might get lost, I don't think most people pick up. Unless you're a podcaster. Yeah. That's what we all obsess over.
Yeah. And I had another question is that, so if you listen to the transition from like the sound from when the music ends and then my sound comes and then the actual recording comes, you can totally hear that was all online. Like the audio quality changes right there, because obviously me recording here on Audacity is going to be better sounding than me recording on Zoom. So how do you guys kind of deal with that transition, or like how can you make it sound less like computerized, I guess?
I think a lot of people have come to expect that in an interview setting. Like people know that it's going to be over Skype or over Zoom, or it's going to be some virtual setting, and they don't expect it to be top-notch studio quality when it comes to an interview. I wouldn't sweat it. It didn't sound it was noticeable, but it wasn't distracting from listening to the content of the interview.
Yeah, and the
Okay.
actual volume levels were nice and consistent. So it wasn't like, all of a sudden she was super quiet and you weren't. And through the whole thing, it's just nice and consistent. You're right at around -6, which is about usually where I tell people to shoot for, between -6 and -12. And so, I thought it was great. And like Erik said, I think for me, I always tell people there are always going to be the audio engineers, and they're on the other side, and they're going to go, no, you should have matched EQ because she had a little more treble than you did. And I'm like, to me, I'm the direct opposite. I'm like, is it listenable? Because I was at a conference this week, and they did something really stupid where they had multiple sessions going on at the same time in this really big room. And so I had to focus so much on listening that I couldn't actually pay attention to what I was hearing. And so when I was listening to one in the car this week, and they normally it's just a husband and wife team, but they had a third person in. And so they're out of their comfort zone. And the third person was much lower than the rest of those twos because they weren't used to that. And I was in the car, I'm doing 70 miles an hour. So I got a nice solid going in the background. And every time that guy talked, I had to turn the volume up. And by about halfway through that episode, I was like, I'm going to listen to that later when I'm not in the car, because it was good content, but it was just really distracting. So I think as long as people can hear it, it's not distracting. You don't have some sort of high pitched whine or low pitched rumble, or it doesn't sound like you're in the bathroom, and the echo is so overpowering that you're hearing more of the echo than the actual words. I think as long as you're not distracting, you're fine.
Like we talked about with your mic, it's garbage in, garbage out. So if you're working your mic properly, you have instructed your guests to make sure they're in a quiet room. They have headphones on so they can hear you. They're using an external mic and using it properly. As long as you're controlling the controllables, the fact that it's being done over the internet and recorded that way shouldn't distract too much from the conversation.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's really the toughest part, is a lot of times you have no control, over what the guest is going to do. So when they say, oh, I was just going to use the microphone and the laptop, that's when you're like, boy, this could be
a
little sticky.
Yeah, that's the good thing. Like after 2 years, I feel like now I have more guests than before, so I can just be like, not happening. We're not either not recording it, or if you're recording it, I'm not releasing it. It sounds like crap. So that kind of stuff. Like at least I have a little bit of leverage than I did about a year ago or so.
We're all at a point where we have to take what we can get, and then eventually, as we grow, we can start to pick and choose. And fortunately, you're getting there. So
it's just slowly, but. Yeah, but I feel like that's definitely great advice, because it's like, if I can control it at the time, that's the only way nowadays that I feel comfortable going forward with it. Sometimes I'll be like, hey, your Wi-Fi is not working and we gotta, do it some other time, because it's really not worth my time trying to fix it, because I honestly don't know how to fix it afterwards. It gets really crazy.
Well, and not only that, but it doubles, if not triples, your time when you're trying to pieces, part things. It's hard enough to edit out just good old fashioned ums and knows, but now you've got all these other technical glitches and things like that. And who's got a time for that? So you can save yourself from.
And I had the question about the ums and.
Well, I was going to ask you, do you do any kind of editing?
I have a little bit lag here.
That's okay. I did hear.
I don't do any ums and ahs. Oops.
That's okay. For me, I heard them, and I have a hard time not listening through the ears of a podcaster. I don't know that those bothered me until I started podcasting. And when I hear them, I kind of go, all you had to do was highlight, delete, so they don't really bug me. They bug me again when it becomes distracting. So if I have
you guys again.
Okay. Are we back? This is where she's probably going to get kicked out.
Yep. She's frozen now.
Yeah.
Can't hear.
Can you hear us? Oh, no.
And she's kind of back.
Maybe.
Speaking of edit points.
I lost again.
I guess we should move so she knows we're not frozen.
It's still slow.
Can you hear us though?
Yeah, it's a little spotty still. Let me try just to change my. And you guys can't tell me that your Wi-Fi sucks, so we can't have you on the show. Like, you can't say that.
There's about a 10-second lag there.
I guess we should talk so
Yeah.
she can hear us.
What? There's still a little bit lag. I can't get it to connect.
A big lag, apparently.
Yeah, that's.
With regard to the ums,
Okay.
It
It's
didn't.
a little bit better.
I didn't even notice them. So
Yeah.
I don't listen through the ears of a podcaster. I'm listening through the ears of a conversationalist, and the ums and the uhs didn't bother me at all.
Mhm.
To me, editing a podcast and going in and taking out all the ums, the reward isn't worth the effort. I don't think it cleans up an episode enough to spend an hour of my time taking out all of the ums.
Yeah.
But it's all personal preference.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it really
I have to do it with some guests because some guests are really like that's how they talk. So then it becomes annoying. So if it's annoying, then I'll do the effort. But if it's not, then I'm like, okay, let's keep it as it is.
Because it takes a lot of time, and it kind of goes back to before. If there's so many ums, your nose, or whatever their crutch word is, and it becomes, then you're not listening to what they're saying again. You're like, oh my gosh, they just said again.
You're counting them.
Yeah, you're like, oh, we're up to 37. That's when it's time to pull them out. So I think you're okay in this particular episode. So
Okay. Yeah, definitely. And then any advice for like getting more downloads, because that's always the big thing.
When I looked at it, and this is where the bonus of me working for Libsyn, you're not in Radio Public or the radio.com app. So if you go into your destinations and click on add new, those are two that are available that you could add. And then because you're having guests, now realize that some people will do this and some people will not, but make it drop dead easy for them to share it. So you could say, hey, thanks so much for coming on the show. If you want to share this on your social networks, please use the information below, or feel free to make up your own, which they're never going to, because you could have, here's a tweet, and then have the square graphic for Instagram, and here's this one for that, so that they don't have to think about it at all. And some people will be happy to share it, and then other people, they won't. And they were nice enough to share their content, so don't get an attitude.
How often are you sending out your emails?
So right now, first we were doing I have done a weekly one, I've done a monthly one, I've done many variations of it. And then the response in the newsletter was very slow. So we tried to, after the workshop that you did, I tried to move towards lead magnets and say, let's do more of those. And, we plateaued at some point. Like, we just did the email course series, but I want to do more of those email courses, which are more like, again, delivering more value versus just a newsletter which has the episodes from before. It was just, again, less reward for all the work that goes into it. So right now it's just that email series, and it's for the conference.
I would recommend you stay in front of your audience on a consistent basis. So whether that's through your email or through through social media, however you want to do it. I'm on your email list, and I get an email occasionally from you, and out of sight, out of mind. So if you're not top of mind, if you're not working to stay in front of your audience on a consistent basis, they're not going to come around.
Yeah.
And even those that don't listen to you, if they see you showing up in their social media feed on a daily basis, eventually they will come and check you out. So that's one thing I would do, is be consistently present.
And then I didn't check your email, but when you send email, like just your personal email, make sure you have a link to your website in your signature. I'm always amazed at how many people don't do that one. And the reason I say that is, for a while, I had a link it looked like my website, but it was a trackable link. And I was amazed at how many people clicked the link in my signature. So that's just an easy one to get people back. And then, you've got the subscribe buttons at the bottom of your page. You might want to have a page on your website that said subscribe so people could find the buttons. That way there'd be one at the top and one at the bottom. Are there any kind of, conferences, or if you're, at your school or anything like that, like a bulletin board where you could hang up a flyer about the podcast or anything like that? And I get the feeling she can't hear a thing I say because she's laughing. That is one nice thing about.
Hold on.
And she's
You
almost.
guys are frozen again. Hold on.
Okay.
We're not frozen. You're frozen.
No, you're frozen.
No, you're frozen. I'm not frozen. You're frozen.
Not,
I'm like the heat
not
miser, and you're
stable
like
message
like
somewhere.
Mr. Freeze over there. Like you're the blue guy. I'm the red guy.
Yeah, no matter what I do, it doesn't like to join any other network, so
Well, now you're back. Can you hear us?
can't hear it.
You can't hear it.
No.
All right.
Yeah, I can't hear you guys. Hold on. I would have to go
Hmm.
back once this is released. I'll have to go back and listen to the whole episode.
Everything we said.
Yes, still frozen.
That's weird because if we just sit here, we probably look like we're frozen. So we should be waving or
Sorry,
something.
guys. I don't know what's going on.
That's all right.
I wonder if she should.
It keeps disconnect. I think it keeps like getting on and off. Let me try.
Disconnect and log back in.
I was going to say, you might want to.
Just one.
But she can't hear us to do that.
Should I kick her out? Yeah,
I
I can do that. I can remove her,
Can I-
which would then force her.
Yeah, can I reload this page, please?
Yeah, give that a shot. This is where we need the technical difficulty music.
Please stand by. Put it
Yeah,
back.
remember that? Technical. Man, I have not thought about that in forever.
Yeah.
I was watching. I'm going to remove her, so she will have to come
Yes.
back in.
Ejector.
We were watching this video from 1988, back when, first of all, we were amazed at camcorders because we had sound. And now you look back and like, why is grandma is Moses? Because she's sitting next to literally a light that looks like it's a burning bush. It's this
Did
old.
you post this on Facebook where
Yeah.
you were wearing shorts that
Yeah.
were way too short?
Yeah.
And
It
you,
was just,
you had like a tank top on or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
And
I was just like,
that
holy.
description was awesome.
It was just like, we're like, and the fact that nobody was looking at their phones.
Right.
That
Because
was-
nobody had
And
phones.
phones, yeah, that was it was interesting. And now she's back on her phone. There we go.
Yeah, I'm gonna use my phone. So this Wi-Fi is better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was talking about growing your audience. If you don't have one already, put a signature in your email that has a link back to your website.
Okay.
Do you have any kind of event? I know you have your online event. Are there any physical events that you guys go to, or is there any place at the schools that you could hang up even a flyer that promotes it? Or one of the things I used to do, and again, I'm dating myself, but when I had a podcast originally, I was still going to school and it was for musicians. And what I would do is I would have your typical Microsoft Word document.
Yeah.
And at the bottom, I would have the little things where you would tear off a tab, and I would hang that up and always pull one tab off
Yeah.
because it's perceived value that like, oh, that must be good. Somebody took a tab.
Yeah.
The only thing on the tab would be the web address, or I guess today you could put a QR.
code.
Yeah. So people could scan it.
Yeah.
Um,
Interesting. Yeah. Sure. You do some a lot of in-person events. So I do work with colleges and universities, because this is a great area to be in, where there are tons of universities real close by in Boston and Providence and
Nice.
stuff. And so I do a lot of that. And then my biggest platform is Twitter. That's where I get a lot of my content, as well as guests and people too, which has grown a lot. Like we're at 6,100, so which is good. And I feel like if everyone tuned into every episode, that would be great. But as Erik says, not everyone uses the content through downloads. So it's definitely interesting, because a lot of people know me, which is great, which I never thought people would know me, like in the STEM circles. So, but the poster idea is great. I could definitely send some posters out to people, and even guests who are at colleges, and they can post.
You do a great job on the episode asking people to share it. I would do that in your live settings as well. Thanks for having me today. Make sure you check out the podcast. If you love it, if you could share it and help our audience grow, it just helps our STEM community grow. And just get people to, ask people to share it. That's the only way they're going to do it, is if they are asked to do it.
Okay.
And there's a website, clicktotweet.com, that you could actually go over and put the link to your website, like wherever the episode is, and it will create this little itty bitty link. And when your audience clicks on that, it launches Twitter and writes your pre-written tweet and puts the link back to your website. So that's an easy thing that you could put on your website. If Twitter's kind of your primary platform, you could easily put that on the website. It's like, hey, did you like this episode? Click here to tweet. And all they have to do is literally click and go send. And that makes it super easy.
Great.
So,
yeah, awesome. And then I think you were saying something about being in front of the audience. So I've been seeing a lot of like engagement on Instagram, and which wasn't my platform for a long time. And now that I have a little bit help from some people with branding and stuff, because Instagram is all visual, and that's where the branding comes from too. Where you saw like on the website is through like what we were like inspired to do on Instagram is what we tried to copy in our branding. And Instagram is where I'm trying to show my face every day, and trying to like get engaged through stories, because those are a great platform for it as well. So so it's a little like a little divided effort, obviously, because it's still kind of a one-person show, but I'm very willing to try anything that works.
Sure. You never know what's gonna, you could say one, it's always in some cases not the number, it's who's watching or who's listening, because you could have somebody find you from another college or whatever, and they're like, holy cow, I found this podcast, you've got to listen to this. And all of a sudden, because I see it every day at Libsyn, where somebody will go, there must be a problem, because I normally get 50 downloads a day, and today I got 300. And you could see where they found an episode, and like 15 people downloaded each episode 15 times. So it's just 15, 15, 15, 15, 15. And I'm like, and then you look and you're like, no, this is all via a feed. And apparently they're in France, and you're like, I don't know why, but you're blowing up in France. So that does happen. So
good. Did you guys have any comments on the show notes or anything like that? Could I do something different there?
No, I thought they were, you had, could you do, you mentioned them. And then when you go to them, you had the good news is this always frustrates me when somebody goes, there'll be a link in the show notes, and then you go there and there's no link in the show notes. That is one way, because it's like, oh, great, I don't have to worry about it. There is a plugin you could use called Pretty Link that if you wanted to, like we listened to episode 62, and you could say, hey, just go to herstemstory.com/62. And what that plugin is you put the full link that's, whatever and it then says, what do you want to put in? And you go 62. So when people go to herstemstory.com/62, it then redirects it to that. So I use that plugin, and in theory, it makes it a little easier to remember. So if somebody's on the treadmill or in the car or something like that, they can, just use that to get to the episode. I
thought the show notes were good. It gave you the links to the things that you mentioned. It gave me a little synopsis of the episode. It wasn't too long. Didn't take me a long time to read, but it was useful.
Okay.
So I don't have any issue with the way your show notes are right now.
Yeah,
As long as
is-
they're long enough to attract some Google attention.
yeah.
Yeah.
The only thing I noticed is he said trying to share his screen. Hey, we're back to that again, huh? All right. But your links aren't links. It says links, but when I put my mouse over them, they're not actually like clickable.
They won't take you anywhere.
No. So I was like, which is fine. I mean, you copy paste and you're back in business. The only thing that and I just went, maybe that's just me being an old middle-aged white guy, is I believe it was the conference page. Nope, it's not the conference. There was one page, maybe about. The about page has slightly smaller gray text instead of black text. And when I first saw it, I'm like, okay, it's one of those things like, it's not the end of the world. It just for me was a little harder to read. I just like, I need to focus here on that.
You're right. You're right. Her links don't work.
Yeah.
So I did post links, but I didn't finish it.
Yeah.
Oh.
But yeah, on the about page, the text is a little, I think, smaller than it is on the other pages, and it's slightly gray as opposed to black.
Okay. And I do see the warning too. It says the warning is actually weird because it's saying, warning, continue targeting switch is equivalent to break. Did you mean to use continue to? I don't know what that means.
Yeah, that's when I was like, okay.
Something is wrong with the
something's-
slider. So the reason this website looks this clean is because it uses a slider elementer kind of thing on WordPress, which is super complicated to operate and change and that kind of stuff. And so, we're just still figuring this out, what's happening.
And does the one woman have a squid on her shoulder
Yes.
on the front page? Okay.
Yes. Did it disappear?
No, it's still there. I was just like, that looks like a squid.
Yeah, because we interviewed a squid scientist.
Oh, well, there you go.
Of course you
That is-
did. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah. And she is it's not even funny. She's a big deal. She has a huge following, but she has a squid mobile in Connecticut. If you drive around, you'll see it. It has squids on the whole
That
car.
is awesome.
I want a squid mobile. Yeah.
Seriously, it's crazy. I know. People study so many different things. I had a girl who studied the sun. I'm like, okay.
I'm picturing the squid mobiles like Sun. Like when you're 16, you can get your license. You just got to drive around in the squid mobile. Any other questions for us as we start to wrap up?
No, I think this was great. I think I'm very excited that there's some things I'm doing right, which is always, this is we talk in silence, like, in Black Hole, we don't hear a lot of like feedback. People do get excited with everything that they can see, but obviously they don't have enough information or knowledge to kind of tell you what's going good and what can you change. So I learned a lot. So thank you very much.
Yeah, as we for me, like I said, I really love the conversation. You do have the habit, and I think we all do this at the beginning of the show. I don't know if I mentioned this. When you say your URL, you say it very fast. I don't know why we do that. I don't know if it's because we're self-conscious and we don't want to self-promote. So it's like, what's your website? I'm like, it's a podcast review show. And it's like, what?
We just get so comfortable with it. We think everybody knows what it is. It happens in radio all the time. When people are given the phone number to the radio station, they just rattle it off because they've said it 127,000 times.
Yeah.
And so it's natural that we do that. As long as you're conscious of it and you know it happens, it will help you slow down a little bit.
Okay.
And like I said, I had to really nitpick. The only thing I could find that I was like, was I had no idea who Kathryn was.
Yeah.
And that was not a big deal. Erik, any final thoughts on her STEM story?
I think it's great. I think you've come a long way. Your interviews sound very conversational. Your audio sounds great. It's put together well. Take that housekeeping stuff and move it after the show introduction. So we're hooking brand new listeners as soon as they get to the show. We're not starting in the middle of a conversation. And other than that, you're on your way.
Okay, awesome.
And if you would like to have your podcast reviewed, simply go out to podcastreviewshow.com. I'm Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting.com. You can find me at schoolofpodcasting.com. Erik, where can people find you?
You can find me anytime you'd like over at podcasttalentcoach.com.
Prash, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
And we'll see you again real soon with another episode of the Podcast Review Show.